Before the white dress, before the diamonds, before the soft voice the world tried to copy, there was a small suitcase. Not a movie contract, not a studio photograph, not a mirror surrounded by warm bulbs. A suitcase. The kind a child can carry when adults decide it's time to move again. For most children, a suitcase means a visit, a holiday, a few folded dresses, and the promise of coming back. But for Norma Jeane, the little girl who would one day become Marilyn Monroe, a suitcase could mean something else. Another room, another set of rules, another adult deciding where she belonged. That's the part the world often skips. Marilyn Monroe didn't begin as a bright Hollywood dream. She began as a child who learned far too early that home could disappear. And before Hollywood ever taught her how to smile for a camera, childhood had already taught Norma Jeane how to study a room, read a face, and become whatever might keep her safe. So when people ask what created Marilyn Monroe, the answer isn't simple. It wasn't only beauty. It wasn't only Hollywood. It began with a little girl trying to understand why staying anywhere could be so hard. If you want Marilyn remembered this way, not as gossip, not as a headline, but as Norma Jeane before the world renamed her, then like this video, subscribe, and stay with us. Because to understand the woman in the spotlight, we have to begin with the child who kept losing the light in the room. So we begin with the suitcase. At first it looks ordinary, a few dresses folded inside, a small comb, maybe a school paper, maybe something soft a child keeps because it makes an unfamiliar room feel less strange. Nothing famous, nothing glamorous, nothing that belongs beside the name Marilyn Monroe. But that's exactly why it matters. Because before Norma Jeane became a face on magazine covers, she was a child whose life kept being packed and unpacked by adults. A suitcase was not only luggage, it was the quiet sign that nothing around her was fully settled. A child should not have to learn that feeling too early. She should know where her bed is. She should know who will be there in the morning. She should know that if she leaves a doll on a chair, the chair will still be hers tomorrow. But Norma Jeane's childhood did not give her that kind of steady answer. The suitcase stayed close, because home was not a simple word for her. Home could mean foster parents. Home could mean her mother for a short time. Home could mean an institution. Home could mean a guardian. Home could mean one more room where she had to be polite before she could feel safe. And that fear began almost before she was old enough to name it. Norma Jeane Mortensen was born in Los Angeles on June 1, 1926. That sounds almost poetic now, because the city would one day become part of her legend. Hollywood was nearby. Studios were working. Film was becoming one of America's great dreams. But Norma Jeane was not born into that dream. She was born near Hollywood, not inside its warmth. Her mother, Gladys Pearl Baker, worked in the film business as a film cutter. So from the beginning, the movie world was close to Norma Jeane's life. But not in the way people might picture. This was not red carpets and applause. It was the working side of Hollywood. Long hours, low security, pressure, a young mother carrying more than she could handle alone. Gladys was not a monster in this story. She was a struggling woman, and that difference matters. It would be easy to make her cruel just to make the story simpler, but real life is not that neat. Gladys had serious mental health struggles, and she was not able to give Norma Jeane the stable childhood every child deserves. So the baby girl was placed with foster parents, Albert and Ida Bolander, in Hawthorne. For a while, that early home gave Norma Jeane some structure. There were routines, there were adults, there was a place to sleep. But even then, the feeling was complicated. Because a child can sense when she belongs by love, and when she belongs by arrangement. The Bolander home may have looked stable from the outside, but the deeper question was already forming inside Norma Jeane's life. Who keeps me? Who chooses me? Who stays? That question would follow her long before the world ever asked her to become Marilyn. When Norma Jeane was 7, it seemed for a moment that the story might change. Gladys bought a small house in Hollywood and brought her daughter to live with her. For a child who had already been living away from her mother, that must have felt like a door opening. Mother and daughter under one roof, a room that could finally feel like hers. A chance, maybe, at the ordinary thing other children seemed to have, without needing to ask. But the moment did not last. In 1934, Gladys suffered a serious breakdown and was later committed to a state hospital. Norma Jeane became a ward of the state, and once again, her future moved into the hands of other adults. This is where the suitcase becomes personal. It is no longer just a thing that holds clothes. It becomes the object that follows a child when the adults around her cannot keep life steady. And again, we have to be careful. This is not a story about blaming a sick mother. It is a story about what happens to a child when illness, money, law, and fear all stand between her and the simple feeling of being kept. Norma Jeane did not need a perfect childhood. No child has one. But she needed a safe place that did not keep changing. She needed someone to say, not only with words, but with life itself, "You can stay." Instead, the suitcase stayed close. And when Gladys disappeared into hospitals, Norma Jeane became a girl whose future had to be discussed, arranged, and decided by others. That is a hard way to learn childhood, and that lesson followed her into every room that came next. Pause here for a moment, because this is where people often make a quiet mistake. They bring Marilyn backward. They look at the little girl and already see the famous woman. They bring in the blonde hair, the studio smile, the white dress, the photographers, the men, the fame, the later loneliness. But that little girl was not Marilyn Monroe. Not yet. She was Norma Jeane, a child trying to understand why love could be present and still not feel secure. A child trying to make sense of adults who cared, but could not always keep her. A child learning that being wanted and being safe were not always the same thing. That is not gossip. It is not a headline. It is the emotional root of the story. Before Marilyn Monroe became a face people projected dreams onto, Norma Jeane was a girl looking for one steady place to put herself. And if we forget that, we miss the person underneath the image. The world later called her glamorous. But childhood taught her something far less glamorous first. How to adjust, how to please, how to wait, how to survive the next change. After Gladys was hospitalized, Norma Jeane moved through different homes and arrangements. Some rooms may have been kind, some adults may have tried, but even kindness can feel fragile when a child knows she may not be staying. That is the pain of borrowed rooms. You can sleep there. You can eat there. You can sit at the table. You can learn the rules. But some part of you knows the room belongs to someone else first. Norma Jeane had to learn that feeling young. A suitcase beside a bed. A dress folded neatly because it might need to be packed again. A doorway where adults speak in lowered voices. A child listening without being fully included. This kind of childhood teaches quiet skills. It teaches a child to read moods. It teaches her to notice when a voice changes. It teaches her to become pleasant when she is afraid. It teaches her that being easy to love might help her stay. Later, the world would call Marilyn Monroe charming. It would call her soft. It would call her magnetic. But long before a camera made those qualities famous, Norma Jeane had learned how to sense what a room wanted from her. That does not mean childhood pain created Marilyn by itself. People are not made from one wound. But pain can shape the way a person learns to survive. And for Norma Jeane, survival often meant becoming acceptable to the room she was in. Then came the place that made the fear of being left feel even clearer. The Los Angeles Orphans Home. In 1935, Norma Jeane entered the Los Angeles Orphans Home. The name itself feels heavy, even though the institution was not remembered by everyone as cruel. Some accounts describe it as orderly, even well-run. But that does not remove what it meant to the child inside it. Because the building was not the whole pain. The meaning was, to Norma Jeane, it could still feel like proof that she had been left somewhere. A bed in a dormitory is not the same as a bed at home. A schedule is not the same as belonging. A clean hallway is not the same as being chosen. That is where the suitcase becomes painful. It is no longer only a sign of movement. It becomes proof that a child's life can be packed, carried, and placed somewhere by adults who may mean well, but still hold the power. Try to see her there without turning it into a cheap, sad picture. A young girl in a plain dress, other children nearby, rules to follow, meals at certain times, a bed that is hers, but not hers in the way a child needs. And somewhere inside her, the same question. How long will I be here? That question can change a child. It can make her careful. It can make her eager to please. It can make attention feel like warmth. It can make rejection feel much larger than it looks from the outside. And yet, even inside that loneliness, Norma Jeane found a window. The movies. The movies gave Norma Jeane something her rooms could not always give her. They stayed. The screen came alive, and for a while, the world had shape. People entered the story. Their faces were huge, their feelings were clear, their lives seemed to move toward meaning. For a child who had known too much uncertainty, that mattered. The theater was not a home, but it was a place where she could sit still and watch a world that did not depend on which adult had room for her. In later accounts, Monroe connected childhood moviegoing with her early desire to act. That feeling makes sense. The screen was not only entertainment, it was another kind of room, one where people were seen, remembered, and held in light. That idea must have been powerful for Norma Jeane, to be seen and not sent away, to be looked at and kept in the frame, to become someone whose face stayed after the room went dark. The movies did not save her childhood. No screen can do that for a child who needs real safety. But they gave her a language for wanting more. And maybe, in those dark theaters, Norma Jeane began to understand something she could not yet fully say. There might be a world where being seen felt like belonging. That hope did not erase the pain, but it gave the pain somewhere to go. Not every room in Norma Jeane's childhood was cold. That needs to be said. Because when people tell the story of Marilyn Monroe, they often make the early years sound like one long corridor of loss. But Norma Jeane's life also had pockets of warmth, and those moments matter because they show what she was reaching for. One of the most important figures was Anna Lower, Grace Goddard's aunt. When Norma Jeane lived with Anna Lower, she found something closer to real gentleness. This was one of the warmer, steadier periods of her childhood. There was care, there was routine, there was a feeling that someone saw the child, not just the problem. For Norma Jeane, that kind of care must have felt different. Not dramatic, not grand, just steady enough to breathe. And sometimes the small steady things are what wounded children remember most. A quiet room, a woman who listens, a meal that does not feel temporary, a bed that feels less borrowed. The suitcase, for a little while, may have rested. That matters because it proves Norma Jeane was not only shaped by loss, she was also shaped by the moments when love reached her. And maybe that made the losses sharper. Because once a child has felt warmth, she knows exactly what is missing when it goes away. Anna Lower gave her a glimpse of the things she kept needing. But even the gentler rooms did not last forever. Life moved again, and Norma Jeane returned to the Goddards, where another change would soon push her toward adulthood far too early. By now, a pattern had formed. Norma Jeane had learned that safety often came through other people's approval. Be good, be sweet, be grateful, do not cause trouble, read the mood, fit the room, maybe then, the room will keep you. This is where the title of this story needs care. Childhood trauma did not simply create Marilyn Monroe, as if a famous woman can be explained by pain alone. That would be too easy, and it would be unfair to Norma Jeane. She was not only wounded, she was intelligent, she was observant, she had humor, ambition, charm, and a deep wish to be taken seriously. But early instability did shape her emotional world. It taught her to notice attention. It taught her to fear being left. It taught her that a person might have to become pleasing in order to stay safe. Later, Hollywood would reward some of those same survival skills. The camera liked her softness. Photographers liked her ability to respond. Studios liked the way she could become a fantasy on command. Audiences liked the warmth she seemed to give through the screen. But those qualities did not begin as a product. They began inside a real person, a girl who had learned how to adapt, because adapting had once helped her survive. That is the quiet link between childhood and Marilyn. Not that pain made her beautiful, not that sadness made her famous, but that a little girl who kept losing home grew into a woman who understood, deeply, how powerful it could feel to be wanted. Then, at 16, the suitcase appeared again. This time, beside a marriage paper. In 1942, Norma Jeane's life reached another turning point. She was living with Grace and Doc Goddard in Van Nuys. For a while, there was routine, school, a neighborhood, a roof that seemed to hold. Then Doc Goddard's job required a move to West Virginia. The Goddards could not simply take Norma Jeane out of California, and if no other solution was found, she faced the possibility of returning to the orphanage. For a girl who had already lived through foster homes, institutional life, and borrowed rooms, that fear was not small. It was the old fear wearing a new face. Where will I go? Who will keep me? How long before I have to pack again? The answer adults found was marriage. Norma Jeane married James Doherty on June 19, 1942, shortly after turning 16. That marriage should not be treated like a strange romantic headline. It should be understood as part of the same search for safety that had followed her since childhood. The suitcase changes again here. Now it is confirmed by the record of her life. Foster homes, the orphanage, the Goddards' move, and the marriage that kept her from being sent back. Marriage gave Norma Jeane a new name, a household, and a way to stay out of the system. But it also asked a child to become an adult before she had finished being young. That was the cost. The suitcase finally stopped moving for a while, but the girl who carried it had already learned how temporary safety could feel. Years later, when Hollywood began shaping Marilyn Monroe, it did not invent Norma Jeane's hunger to be seen. It found it. Then it polished it. Then it sold it. The camera offered something that childhood had not given her steadily, attention that stayed, at least for the length of a photograph. The studio offered a new name, Marilyn Monroe, a name that sounded bright, smooth, memorable, a name that could fit on posters and contracts, a name the world could say more easily than it could understand the woman beneath it. The public saw confidence, but confidence can be complicated. Sometimes it is natural. Sometimes it is practiced. Sometimes it is a beautiful cover built over a trembling place. Marilyn's image became one of the most recognizable in the world. But the emotional roots underneath were older than fame. A child who had wanted to be kept became a woman millions wanted to look at. But being looked at is not the same as being held. Being desired is not the same as being safe. Being famous is not the same as being known. That is what people missed when they saw only the blonde image. The world learned how to look at Marilyn Monroe. But the little girl with the suitcase was still asking for something deeper. A place to belong without performing for it. People often tell Marilyn Monroe's childhood as if it explains everything. That is another mistake. No single part of a person's life explains the whole person. Not a foster home, not an orphanage, not a mother's illness, not a teenage marriage, not Hollywood, not beauty, not pain. Norma Jeane was more than what happened to her. That is why this story must be handled gently. Pain did not create Marilyn Monroe by itself. Norma Jeane survived pain, responded to opportunity, worked hard, learned the camera, and helped build the image the world later confused with the whole person. That distinction matters. Because if we say trauma created Marilyn, we make Norma Jeane sound passive, as if she was only shaped by harm. She was not. She had agency, even when the world around her gave her very little. She watched, she learned, she adjusted, she reached, she worked. She kept moving toward rooms where she hoped the light might finally stay. The childhood trauma did not make her a star in some simple way. It shaped the hunger underneath, the longing to be seen, the fear of being left, the deep wish for a home that would not vanish when someone else changed their mind. And when we return to the suitcase now, it no longer looks like a child's object. It looks like the first symbol of a lifelong search. So look at the suitcase one final time. At the beginning, it looked ordinary. A child's clothes, a comb, a few folded things. Then it became personal, because it followed Norma Jeane through rooms that never fully belonged to her. Then it became painful, because it showed how a child's life could be packed and moved by adults. Then it became confirmed by the record of her early years. Foster homes, the Los Angeles Orphans home, the Goddards, Anna Lower, and the marriage at 16, when another move threatened to send her back. And now, at the end, it becomes something else. Not just luggage, not just sadness, not just an object from a difficult childhood. It becomes proof of the real Norma Jeane, before the world made Marilyn Monroe larger than life. The suitcase did not create Marilyn Monroe. It reminds us that before the world asked her to perform, Norma Jeane had already learned how to survive rooms that did not fully belong to her. And maybe that is why Marilyn touched people so deeply. Because underneath the beauty was something human. The wish to be chosen, the wish to be safe, the wish to stay, the wish to be seen without being changed first. The world later remembered the blonde, the dress, the photographs, and the bright studio smile. But the suitcase remembers the child. And if we are careful, we can remember her too. So let's end with Norma Jeane alive. Not with the famous image, not with the final years, not with the sorrow people often rush toward. Let's end with a little girl in a movie theater. She is sitting in the dark, small in her seat, the light from the screen moving across her face. For once, she is still. No one is packing her things in that moment. No one is deciding which room comes next. No one is telling her to be quiet, be good, be grateful, be easy. She is watching. The screen is bright. The faces above her are larger than life. And maybe, for a little while, the world feels less uncertain. Before Marilyn Monroe became the woman the world wanted to look at, Norma Jeane was a child looking at the screen, hoping there was a place where someone like her could be seen and still be safe. That is the childhood behind the image. Not a simple explanation, not gossip, not a headline. A little girl with a suitcase, searching for a home. If this story helped you see Marilyn not just as a star, but as Norma Jeane, the child behind the image, still searching for a place to belong, then like this video, subscribe, and stay with us. Here, we remember Marilyn carefully, beyond the image, and always as a real woman first.